Hey guys, we're going to continue our study of the Civil War today. Up to this point, we've seen a lot of Confederate victories, but today's lesson is going to show a shifting tide. And by that, I mean that you're going to see the Union start to take over and win some very important victories. Let's get started. While the Union won some important battles and was holding a successful blockade, the Confederacy was more successful on the battlefield. If you look at that picture on the right, you'll see the image is Union gunboats firing upon the Confederates during the Battle of Malvern Hill. Confederate success on the battlefield led to high morale among its citizens, whereas in the Union, morale was low. And morale just basically means their attitudes. So you had the Confederacy winning all these battles, they were feeling great, they were excited, but the Union, because of their losses, they weren't feeling so great. They weren't nearly as excited and as happy as the Confederacy. The Battle of Antietam and the Emancipation Proclamation, which followed, changed the war, but the citizens of the North began to wonder if the war effort was worth the incredibly high death toll. So they're starting to question if this is even worth their efforts at all. Let's look at some of the most important battles, who won, and the casualties. Some of the major battle casualties are listed here, and you will see the amounts of people killed, wounded, or lost. That's what a casualty is, leading up to the summer of 1863. So you've got these different dates. You can pause this video if you want to look through it, but I'm just going to leave this chart up here. And it shows you that when the Confederacy wins, it's listed as a CSA, and when the Union won, it's listed as a USA. And you can see, guys, look at these battles. At the Shiloh battle here, we lost 34, we didn't necessarily lose them, but the people were either killed, wounded, or lost. 34,445 people were killed, wounded, or lost. So that's very hard to even imagine that many people just in one battle. But that shows you why they were thinking that this maybe wasn't worth it. On April 12, 1861, the Confederate Army fired upon Fort Sumter, which guarded the port of Charleston, South Carolina. At 2:30 p.m. the next day, Union forces surrendered the fort. After this attack, President Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers. So after this attack, the Union knew that they needed to have some more soldiers. If you look at the bottom right corner, you'll see Fort Sumter. The left is Beauregard, and the top right is Robert Anderson. Pictured here. Now we have First Manassas, and we call that Bull Run. The first major battle of the Civil War occurred north of Manassas Junction, about 20 miles west of Washington, D.C. With 4,700 casualties, everyone realized that the war was not going to be short or easy. So that many casualties. Remember, casualties are people killed, people lost, or people injured. Then we have Forts Henry and Donelson. So we got Fort Henry and Fort Donelson. Ulysses S. Grant gained control of Forts Henry and Donelson in February 1862. A major victory for the Union, the fall of Forts Henry and Donelson opened up Tennessee and Alabama to Union advances. There were 17,655 casualties in these battles. So these numbers, guys, that really illustrates to you just the impact of war, the cost of war, the amount of people that were getting injured and getting killed. The Battle of Shiloh. I kind of pointed this one out to you earlier. Camped at Pittsburgh Landing along the Tennessee River, the Union Army under Major General Grant was attacked by Confederate forces under General Albert Sidney Johnston. Ultimately, Johnston was killed, and the Confederates were forced to retreat from the bloodiest American battle up to that time, with 23,716 casualties. Shiloh ended Confederate hopes of blocking the Union advance into northern Mississippi. Second Manassas is the second battle of Bull Run. At the Second Battle of Manassas, Robert E. Lee led Stonewall Jackson and James Longstreet as they outmaneuvered Union General John Pope, driving the Union Army back to Washington, D.C. There were 22,180 casualties in this battle. Antietam. The Battle of Antietam technically ended in a draw, but is considered a strategic win for the Union because the Confederacy withdrew. Following the battle, Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. Antietam saw 23,100 casualties, making it the single bloodiest day in American history. Fredericksburg. Following Antietam, the Union saw another victory at Fredericksburg, 60 miles from Richmond. Arriving at the banks of Rappahannock River, the Union Army faced a smaller Confederate army. However, pontoon bridges were needed to cross the river. By the time the bridges arrived, the Confederates had been reinforced and entrenched on high ground. The Union attempted a bloody uphill attack that was forced back at a total cost of 17,929 casualties. Chancellorsville. At Chancellorsville, Robert E. Lee outmaneuvered Union leader Joseph Hooker. Lee took a great risk and divided the army against the much larger Union force. This is considered Lee's greatest victory, but it cost him his greatest general, Stonewall Jackson. Total casualties are estimated at 24,000. On the left image there, you will actually see an image of Stonewall Jackson. The situation as the summer of 1863 arrives. So that led us up to the summer of 1863. And now we're seeing the tide shift here. Vicksburg. In the west, United States military forces under Ulysses S. Grant surround Vicksburg, Mississippi, located at a significant point on the Mississippi River. A loss at Vicksburg would mean that the Confederate territory would be cut in half. So if the Union can win here, they can cut their territory in half. After 47 days of siege, Lieutenant General John C. Pemberton surrenders Vicksburg to Grant on July 4th, 1863. So the Union wins this battle. Gettysburg. In the east, Confederate forces under General Robert E. Lee invade the northern state of Pennsylvania. At this point in war, the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia has a winning record, and Confederate General Robert E. Lee has a plan to move his army north. So the Confederates are still essentially winning this battle at this point, and Robert E. Lee has a plan to keep moving them forward. The 5 reasons that Lee invaded Pennsylvania are listed below. 1, it would disrupt the Union's ability to attack the Confederate capital at Richmond, Virginia. It would draw the United States Army away from the safety of the defenses of Washington, D.C., and they could fight them in the open. They also wanted to take the war away from the farmers in Virginia who were having problems planting and harvesting crops, as both armies had been camping or fighting on their land for the previous 2 summers. They also wanted to live off the land and collect supplies to take back to Virginia, and they also wanted to win a decisive victory on northern soil in hopes of bringing the Civil War to a close. So the further north they got, the more land they could take, the better chance they had of winning. So this is why Robert E. Lee, remember that is a Confederate general here, wanted to invade. On July 1st, 1863, Union forces clashed with Lee's army. After 3 days of fighting and 51,000 casualties killed, wounded, or missing, the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia is defeated. Lee and his army leave Pennsylvania and retreat to Virginia. Never again would the Confederates invade a northern state in large numbers. So they retreated back to Virginia, and the Union has another victory. This is what it looks like after Vicksburg and Gettysburg. So Vicksburg and Gettysburg were really the turning point of the Civil War for the Union here. They won major, major victories. The aftermath of these shifting tides. In the United States, or the Union, the victories at Gettysburg and Vicksburg increased the morale. Their attitudes got more positive of the United States and its armies. Many people now feel that the war can be won, so they're starting to feel better about things. In the Confederate States, the losses at Vicksburg and Gettysburg decreased the morale of the Confederate States and armies. For most of the remainder of the war, the Confederates will fight on the defensive. So rather than winning all the time, they're starting to feel like they need to defend themselves. Back at Gettysburg, the dead are buried in quickly dug battlefield graves. Most of the Confederate dead were left on the field in their shallow graves for 8 to 10 years until Southern charity groups had most of the bodies taken away to cemeteries in the South. On November 19, 1863, a Soldiers' National Cemetery was established at Gettysburg for the Union dead. Music played and speeches were made, but the most significant speech, lasting approximately 2 minutes, was made by Abraham Lincoln.